Community-wide movement dedicated to transforming our attitudes, behaviors, and institutions into ones that foster harmonious relationships with each other and the natural world. And then it lists several items that we consider important to a culture of peace. And as Jeff also said, we're experimenting, we're figuring out, we don't have all the answers. If we did, we would probably package them and sell them or something.
I think that we have the opportunity here to have a really great city council, and I want to thank you all for being here and providing us with your thoughts on the subject. And I'm encouraged. Thank you.
So we're trying to find out what a culture of peace looks like in many different dimensions. How it's grounded, how it makes a difference or can make a difference in a community's life, and not just as sort of an abstract notion. So one of the ones, as all of us most of us are sort of politically interested and have been watching, I believe there's a presidential campaign going on right now, been watching that. We got very curious what debates and conversations and the whole process of running for office in politics would look like in a culture of peace. I do want to do a little shout out to the Tidings. The editor of the Tidings, Bert Outlick, has been working with the Culture of Peace Commission and has been giving a lot of space to this effort. We have 3 races represented tonight. Council seats 1, 3, and 5 are up for election. Council seat 5 is currently held by Rich Rosenthal. He is not opposed, he's unopposed, and he's not here tonight. So we have the 3 candidates closest to me are candidates for council seat number 1, and we'll mention those a couple times so you're clear on that. Then the next 3 are candidates for council seat number 3, and on the other table are 3 of our 4 mayoral candidates tonight. So we'll try. The first question tonight is if you would begin by giving your name and the office that you're running for, just to reinforce that. And tell us, please, what the basics, what you'd like us to know about you, and your initial thoughts.
There are 3 primary values that I hold that the culture of peace actually also holds and sets forth in this community. It's compassion, it's speaking from the heart, and it's openness to diversity. And that's the basis of my campaign. And it goes like this. You deserve to have your voice heard and your dreams and your wishes for the vision of Ashland to become a reality.
I am a warrior for truth, peace, and justice. I'm breathing, I'm me. This initiative for peace is a noble aspiration. There can be no lasting peace without administering justice. And there can be no justice without knowing the truth. And one can't know the truth unless we start asking questions, the right questions.
Ultimately, the key is to turn away from polarization and divisiveness and toward a united community through person-to-person relationships of integrity, compassion, and trust. This is our common future. Let's create it together. To me, that is another expression of the values of the culture of peace.
This, to me, is an example of a community that doesn't just want to talk, that wants to take some action and have an impact in their community. And you're doing that by asking your questions directly of us. But there are some very serious ways that I think our community can work to be more inclusive. And that's one of my biggest priorities if I were to join this council. My whole reason for running for council this year was in response to some incidents that happened this summer to some people of color in this community, or very unfortunate incidents. One of them involved my wife. And unfortunately, the city response to those incidents, the police department response to the district attorney response locally, left me wishing that we were seeking more to understand each other and I understand that's what your values are too. So, in terms of the Culture of Peace Commission, I strongly support it. I remember speaking with both David and Irene over a year ago about this concept and sitting down with them at the then Beanery, I wish it was still there, and going over some ideas about how to really make this work, because the idea is one thing, but how to actually make it work is another. I'm very proud of them, and I'm proud of the Culture of Peace Commission who brought it together. I'm extremely proud to be part of a council that supported the proclamation that Mayor Stromberg made in support of it, and I believe in the tenets of what you were trying to do. And I hope one of them in particular, one that I fight every single day, is about Indian poverty. And I hope we get to talk about that tonight, because that's one that every single day in my professional life I deal with. So thank you very much for coming.
I'm here every Tuesday for dinner with the homeless community. And that's my community, and that's who I'm here for tonight. And for City Council position number 1. I grew up on the streets, and it's something that I've tucked away neatly until my recent experiences with poverty and going back into homelessness. And it's bringing a lot of compassion for the situation that's happening out here now. And I have insight that I want to share about this community. And I want to bring the tiny homes. I want to bring shelter 7 nights a week. I want to bring homes and meals 7 days a week. I want us to collaborate deeply and bring compassion to this council. Thank you.
There is a crisis right this moment in Ashland, Oregon. She talked about it. Carol talked about it. We've all talked about it. I was almost on the street. I want the city of Ashland to get up off its butt and stand up for the people in this town who are being driven out of their homes by greedy property management companies and residents. Now they're on the street, and the city's doing nothing about it. We need a class action suit to get these property management people to obey the law and have them pay for all the money they've taken from the people in this town. That's what I will do.
Thoughts about the culture of peace. What's not to love? I believe in we, not I. I believe in the building of effective, sustainable community. Peace and harmony are cornerstones of a great community. It has to exist within us and around us to work well. I believe and support what you're working on, and I embrace it. And I think that if we all work together in this, we will do a heck of a lot better job of creating peace. Thank you.
What do you think is the #1 issue facing our town?
Institutions and industries, culturally, politically, financially, media, educationally, by a certain subset of un-American, non-American, and anti-American aliens, basically, that live in our country. And they don't care about peace. They care about war.
We have about 6 or 8 important issues. There's the issue of caring for our local homeless people, but that's connected with the issue of preserving public order, and both of those are necessary for us to deal with the influx of the national domestic refugee crisis. We have a housing crisis because housing prices in Ashland are going up and nobody's built new rental housing, and people are out who lost their homes in the 2008 are needing to do more rentals. That's a serious thing, but there are ways of approaching it. We're looking at climate change and we're looking at preparedness. The Ashland Forest Resiliency Project is a preparedness project because it helps protect us. Now we have to do the same thing for the city itself.
What would you do specifically to help promote tolerance for diversity of viewpoint, along with race, gender, and sexual orientation, ethnicity, and so forth?
There are a number of people in this community who are specialists in this issue, and I meet with them periodically, privately, just to support and to educate myself. And there was an event called Unpacking Racism Did any of you here go to that? That event, to me, was an example of what's possible to do on these very, very intensely emotional and disturbing situations where we still have racism embedded in our culture and sometimes in our own habits of how we think and perceive people. But in that situation, the community spontaneously put together a remarkable event in which 300 people bore witness to the stories of suffering under racism of individuals. It was an amazing step, and it demonstrates what we're capable of in this community.
Tolerance for viewpoints. Let me tell you a story. I had my students, I teach ethical thinking for the 21st century at SOU. My students had a project. They were going to, and they did, create a restaurant-style dinner for our homeless here in Ashland. They worked for an entire year on that. They raised the money, they did everything they needed to do. There was one assignment I gave them that they would not do. I said, you cannot have this restaurant, you cannot serve these people if you don't know who they are. You have to go out and meet them and find a name. Well, they wouldn't do it. I said, I'll give you 100 points if you do. They still wouldn't do it. But they had the dinner. And at the dinner, we had 60 places for people. 40 homeless showed up, so we had the students eat with the homeless. And it was an amazing experience. They all realized that these are human beings. And they walked away changed and different. And when they walked downtown, they actually had homeless people calling them by name.
To promote diversity of ideas means allowing the most taboo and forbidden of subjects to be publicly discussed, because our goal is to end the war. The war on terror is a war of terror. It comes through GMOs, it comes through vaccines, it comes through promotion of racial warfare and class warfare.
On a personal level, how do you deal with difficult people? What skills do you have for resolving conflicts?
The first thing I do, above all, is listen. And I listen carefully. And that means I put aside my prejudice. And I really look the person in the eyes and I listen. And I let them know I hear what they're saying. I don't repeat back to them what they said. I let them know through nonverbal eye contact as well as speaking to some of their issues. And I say, and I let them know I hear them. And it shows that I care. And I do, from my heart. And then the other thing that I always do, if I find that the conflict is getting deeper, I have a meal with the person. There is nothing more moving than having a simple meal with a person. It works.
Listening deeply, of course, is essential to having an open dialogue. And by having open dialogue, we can diffuse any repression or any animosity that might build up. Speaking truthfully is extremely important, and listening effectively is important. And so this open dialogue, especially around uncomfortable issues, now we've all been programmed and conditioned to think about the world a certain way. It's called social engineering, it's psychosocial engineering. And the control of the media is extremely effective in controlling the narrative of the range of acceptable opinions that we all hold. And so, breaking outside of that narrow framework and talking about the forbidden topics is extremely important, because only by talking honestly about hard to talk about topics will these topics not come back and bite us.
Once I was working with a group of people, everybody worked well together except one person dominated, said obnoxious things, and hijacked the whole conversation. And I was trying to think what to do when she said something that, while it was really obnoxious in delivery, was really on point. And I found myself saying, so-and-so just answered the question that we were trying to figure out. And everybody sort of looked at her and looked at me. And from then on, she became a member of the group, and I realized it was recognition. So sometimes when people are upset, with the city, I invite them to come in to the mayor's office and we just talk. And the office of mayor expresses respect to them. And we usually go out the door friends.
What public policies do you plan to implement that will address the economic disparity in Ashland?
Here's one example. The normal neighborhood area is within the urban growth boundary, but outside the city limits. To be annexed, a developer has to persuade the city council that it is in the community's interest to allow his or her proposed development to come in. I believe we can modify our annexation ordinance to specify things like permanent rental housing or co-housing or smaller houses, things that would lower the cost of housing and could make them available in various ways. We have affordable housing requirements, but they don't really address the specific needs of this community at this time, and they're also blocking the cost of the development because they're too costly. But that's a change in city policy that would help people who are disadvantaged economically.
Then I'd like to see some ordinances changed, so people who want to have boarding houses can do that, so they can keep their own houses. Second thing, those people who want to have accessory units, we need to make it easier for them to actually make them. And if someone needs to rebuild their garage so they can make that into a living unit to earn a little more money so they can pay their mortgage after retirement, we should make that easier to do, not harder to do. And it's a simple fix. It's changing some of the ordinances. And let's make sure that we are friendly to tiny houses. That is a huge new growth area where people can downsize easily. And we can have villages of tiny houses all over Ashland. And finally, let's get food security in this town now.
I was really happy to hear everyone up there, their sincerity with really caring for this town. Because I see this town going through some very large growing pains. And it's good to see some people up there who care and want to preserve our quality of life. So thanks for putting yourselves up there to, on the stage and trying to help us all, live in this town.
Hi, as somebody that's just recently moved to Ashland and just kind of coming here for our experience, I'm really excited to hear that this Peace Commission is even here to even talk to the community and us to talk to you guys. So it's really nice to be a part of this community now because I'm very excited, and I definitely want to help to get younger people in here too, because I think that's a huge thing. So
Right.
It's cool to hear what the town needs and what's going on and what we can do as a community to help. So I am excited.
Creating a culture of peace is more than just a great idea. It has to involve action. Next month, for example, the police department is sponsoring a public training in implicit bias, understanding how we have those. Implicit bias, how we make stuff up, and how we have stereotypes, and how that influences our actions and our views of others. Can you all admit that you may have biases that you may be unaware of, and are there any that you are aware of? And do you think more trainings like this should be available in our community?
Absolutely. I had the privilege of attending the implicit bias class put on by the Peace Commission. And we all have biases. And breaking down the stereotypes for the homeless is one of the things that I want to do. That's why I'm up here. And for everyone to be involved in these classes would be awesome. Because breaking down those barriers, those walls, that's what has to happen first. And then I think the rest will be pretty easy.
When I was living in Virginia Beach around 2001 and 2, there was a swimming pool in our complex. And I was walking by one day, and there was one of the young teenage girls from the complex swimming in the pool, and there were 5 young black guys standing around the pool with her pants down around their butts and their do-rags and everything. And I walked by, and I went, "What are you doing, Doug?" I felt fear. I felt cultural fear. And then I remembered that my son was the same age as they were. And why should these black kids be any different than my son? They were just school friends hanging out. So I went over to the pool and I admonished the kids for not jumping in. I said, why don't you guys get in the water? You look like a bunch of players wanting to get into the game and the coach won't let you.
We all have biases. It's important that we don't act upon them. And that's, I think, the difference between is what the implicit bias issues are about. I'm one of those people that when I see something happening, I want to get better at dealing with it. So I spent 3 days in an intensive training on issues of race, gender, transgender, and how to deal with those issues with our students on campus, how to talk about them. I feel like we're in a position in this town where we've only begun that discussion. I feel the things that Martin says is very important. The issues of making Ashland a better place, an ever more welcoming place for people of goodwill is got to be high on our list of priorities. So people feel comfortable here, so they feel invited here. Thank you.
Boy, would I like more of these trainings. If any of you haven't ever done the Harvard assessment of implicit bias, this thing has been going on since the 80s. Millions and millions of people have done it. And everyone has bias. Everyone does. And it's important to understand where that comes from. And I have been partnering with some leaders in the community who are pushing for racial equity, or pushing for gender parity, and wanting to make sure that we not only train ourselves as a community, but who's it most important for this to happen? We want this to be in the business owners, so that the people who come into our community and interact with our businesses have a positive experience. We want the police and city officials to be better trained. And I have to say, the police trainings that have happened so far, the woman who came, the officer who came to help my wife after she was verbally assaulted in front of her workplace, had just come from one of these trainings for the police department and said that she didn't understand what white privilege was. She didn't believe it existed. And I don't know how one could have gone through a training and walked away with that understanding.
I think a lot of what bias comes from is not understanding or knowing something and being afraid of it. My mom gave me some really great advice when I was a young boy, and she said, "Greg, you're not that bright." What she was driving at, after I got past the shock and horror of that reality, is that the worst thing that you can be is someone who doesn't know what they don't know. And she would encourage me to find out for yourself. And as a boy who grew up in North Salem, I thought I was pretty multicultural, experienced, around. Like, I hung around with lots of different types of people, but it wasn't really until I came down here and I met this beautiful Hispanic girl who was smart and funny and liked me for some reason, ended up marrying her, and we had children, that I could experience it a little bit from her point of view and understand what it's really like, a little bit, to see things from her eyes. And since then, I've really tried to reach out and be part of as many groups and as experiences as I can. And I think as a council and a community, we need to encourage everyone to do that, to stretch a little bit, get uncomfortable, and find out what you don't know.
I think we can start by judging people by the content of their character. Martin Luther King, and I really wish it wasn't all about skin color. How many times did you hear somebody mention a skin color up here? And then multiculturalism worked great for me. I had teammates from Cameroon, white South Africans, Soviets, I call them Soviets, my friends from Kazakhstan, Mexicans, and we came together and we would die for each other.
What really interested or struck you about the email?
Next time we do this, I think that we should sit here and you all should get 1 minute to tell us, and we should sit here and listen, and that's the way things, that would be interesting.
You see things as they are and say, why? I dream things never were and say, why not? I go out and get things done.
When we talk politics, I think that refers to what we see on the national stage. This is not politics. At least it shouldn't be. The decisions we make, the problems we face, the challenges we face together They're not political solutions. It's about problem solving, collaborating. I'm not a politician. I'm an Ashlander just like you, who volunteers my time to represent you.
My heart skipped a beat, honestly, when I read the values of this organization, because these issues of diversity and inclusion are so close to me, so near and dear to my heart. This is my family. And that would be the biggest thing that I would focus on if you elect me to City Council over these next 4 years, is enabling the people who are already doing such amazing work in the community, building equity, diversity, and inclusion into Ashland.
So I just want to go back to this. Ultimately, the key is to turn away from polarization and divisiveness and toward a united community through person-to-person relationships of integrity, compassion, and trust. This is our common future. Let's create it together.
The one thing that I see in your faces and in your questions is this. You want to be heard, and you deserve to be heard in this community. And that means you need information, and you need it timely. And you need to know that we as a council and a city government are being transparent. I think that's critical, because knowledge is power, and you need that.
In that spirit, we want you along. We want your insights and your experience and your expertise and your dedication. And I'd like to bring up for just a moment to close us out tonight, one of the founders of the Ashland Culture of Peace Initiative and its coordinator, David Wick.
Good evening. This is absolutely fantastic. I also wanted to let you know it is historic, and that's true. This is the first in the world that the candidates forum in the framework of a culture of peace and what we've been talking about. This has deep roots. There are people in the United Nations who are aware of what we're doing, are watching us. Internationally, there are cities that are very aware. What we're creating here is a model, is an approach to a community, an entire community. And this is fantastic. The Ashland Culture Peace Commission is a citizens commission. I would die for the time.